California.
Thank you for coming out today. I know you have a lot of options of different things you can do today, so we really appreciate you guys coming here. A couple of announcements before we start. We are recording the program. It'll be available on YouTube. I need to do a little bit of catch up, so I'm going to say a week or two. We do ask that you put your phones on silent, not even vibrate, but silent, because even vibrate can be very distracting. We want to give a big thanks to the Francisco Center for the Performing Arts for letting us be here. It's not easy to come in when there's also a show run happening, and we were able to work the tech out and the set stuff out, so big thank you. Yes. There is a show going on here at the theater this weekend, and it is incredible. If you were here last night, you know it was just, oh my goodness. So there's another show tonight at 7, and then tomorrow at 2. Doors open 30 minutes before the show. It stars Haley Jameson as Anne Boleyn, and it's the last hours, or the hours of Anne, the last day in the life of Anne Boleyn, and it is, again, incredible. I don't know what else to say about that. The library is currently accepting donations via an Amazon wish list for the summer reading program. Our summer reading program theme is Unearth a Story, the same theme that we use for Two Peaks, One Book. The kids will earn some checkpoint rewards for reading, and by the end of the summer they will have built up an archaeological kit, including some stuff to dig. So that's really exciting. So if you'd like to contribute to that, there are quarter-page handouts on the buffet out there. Also, Dr. Fisher brought some cool stickers and patches and stuff that are just free giveaways if you'd like to take one of those. I do want to give a big shout out to Jamie, who did an incredible job planning all these events and getting the rock star of archaeologists here. We had dinner with him last night, and that was my thought. I was like, he is like the rock star of this field. So this is very exciting to have Dr. Fisher here presenting, and I'm just going to turn it over.
Definitely not any sort of rock star.
Hey, a pottery star?
I'd like to, of course, thank Ashley and Jamie and everybody here for having us. It's been an awesome time. I do have to say though, when I was in high school, I always wondered what happened to the drama nerds? Like, where did they go? And since I was part of the other, like the cooler nerds, the band nerds, it's great to see that there is like a home for them. They can be successful. No, but honestly, thank you. We've had a great time here in La Vida, which I was pronouncing incorrectly, which I was corrected about, so that's good. And it's been we've had a great time, and I'm very impressed with everything. And we saw the production last night, which is really amazing. And if you have an opportunity, you should definitely go see that. I don't take myself very seriously, and this is a crowd that has a lot of you have read the book, I think, written by Doug. So I'm going to tell like a few more stories and make it a little lighter than I have in the past. Like, I'm not going to make it like a heavy-duty sort of academic talk. So if you hear something and it sounds like it should be funny, even if you don't find it funny, it would help me out if you laughed. Just make me feel a little better about myself. It would help if you sort of laughed, even though it might not be funny. The overall context for this talk is a nonprofit that I started called the Earth Archive. And I'm going to talk about that kind of throughout the talk, but I started this nonprofit based on the things that I had learned doing LiDAR in both Mexico and Honduras, and also with my sort of overall concern with the massive Earth system change that we're experiencing now, and that's about to get worse. and the inability of scientists to effectively communicate how serious this is, and that we need to take action now.
Yay.
And so this is my, I guess, my attempt to do something about it. And we, you know, even if the Earth Archive doesn't happen, as I was told by several people, the awareness, you know, we've published it a bunch of places, including proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences. I have a TED Talk. I'll mention the TED Talk probably again. If you do view the TED Talk, make sure you click like 5 times. You know, I'm always after
Watch it on multiple devices.
Yes, yeah, multiple, but always after the views. So, but this is, you know, my attempt to do something. But of course, I'm going to tell you about the most astounding place that I've ever been, and that is the Mosquitia area of Honduras. I'm going to tell you this story, the story that's in Doug's book, but of course I have other, you know, my viewpoint is a little different. As I was saying last night at dinner, I wish I had understood better how amazing this place was when I was there. But my head was like so far into trying to do the right thing for the science and making sure everything was done correctly, that I couldn't sort of step away from that and actually experience how amazing it was. How amazing it was to be dropped into this place where animals weren't afraid of people because they'd never seen people. Where there wasn't any plastic. That was the thing that did strike me. I was like, there's no garbage here. There's no plastic. Where in the world do you go where you can go to the, you know, the most remote wilderness area here in the United States and you see bits of plastic and stuff. You didn't see any of that. The stars were absolutely amazing. There was this seamless, at night, this seamless connection between the edge of the jungle and the stars and the Milky Way. And I was just absolutely blown away by that. But my head was so far into the science that I couldn't really understand that. And honestly, it's only been fairly recently that I've kind of you know, let myself experience that. I am writing a monograph that I hope to have done. I have half of it done. And so perhaps, you know, that if I do manage to get that published, come back down and talk about that at some time. But this astounding place experience, you know, it allowed me to experience things that are outside the normal scope of what an academic person would experience. Like official presidential visits, which were always completely insane. And I'm going to talk about this gentleman here, well, it's not really a gentleman.
Should we have the lights down a bit so we could see that better?
Sure.
Yeah.
Is that better?
Oh, much better. Thank you.
And I'll talk about Juan Orlando Hernandez here later, a little later on. Unafraid Animals. Ecologists actually went back to this place, which we call the City of the Jaguar now, and they did what they call they were sort of like an ecological hit team. And they did a kind of a SWAT action where they would go and just record all of the animals and plants and insects that they saw there. When we were originally there and when some of the press came out for the first visit to this place, you know, I said there were the tracks of all sorts of animals under my hammock. Jaguar prints and snake prints and peccary prints and all of this sort of stuff. And people were like, oh, that's not possible. Well, it is possible, and they demonstrated that. There were so many cats in there. They hadn't seen that many felines in a location like that before, including potentially some that haven't been documented yet, so potentially a new species. White-lipped peccaries. Now I have to tell you, I wouldn't be able to recognize a white-lipped peccary from a red-lipped peccary from whatever. But according to the ecologists, they're white-lipped peccaries, and they're not supposed to be there. They're supposed to be, there's some in the Amazon, but they're not supposed to be in Central America. And snakes, massive snakes. And you've all probably read the account of the snake in Doug's book. It was completely accurate. The fangs on that fertile ant snake were so large, when I got home, I measured our Aussie doodle, Mr. Bugglesworth, who's no longer with us anymore, unfortunately, but I measured his canines on there, and the fangs on that snake were longer than the canines on Mr. Bugglesworth, who was about 60 pounds. So he was not a small dog. Meaning that if that snake struck your hand, the fangs would probably get stuck in your hand. And it would just keep injecting venom and venom and venom into your hand. And hopefully you would be able to get out and you might just lose a limb. It was so funny that first evening when we saw that snake, and I remember Doug Preston went back to his hammock to get his notebook because we were all sitting by the fire and he had to just put stuff on there. And I kind of heard him startle, and then he was like, "Guys, there's a really big snake over here." And nobody wanted to wear their snake guards. I was telling them to wear their snake guards. I couldn't get anybody to wear their snake guards. And as soon as we found that snake, and we tried to move it, and then we had to dispatch it, I looked around, everybody had their snake guards.
And would that have worked against snakes like that?
It will. Actually, we bought these things that are made out of like this special Teflon. If they struck the snake guard, so if they struck your hand or someplace like that, or it could probably maybe even go through your boot. So, but the general area that they're going to probably hit you is in here, unless you find something really cool and you sort of lose your mind and you reach your hand in someplace to get something, which is, that's, you know, not saying that ever happened to me, or that was happened to me. And of course, so I'm going to tell stories like this throughout. It's not going to be a normal academic thing, and I better put this up here so I watch my time. And the worst latrine ever. And I've experienced some really horrible latrines. This one was pretty bad, and I have to say I brought a bunch of my former students down to help with the excavation when we did do the excavation. And one of my students, who's very crafty, constructed a magazine rack. And he filled it with Jason Bush, and he filled it with New Yorkers. And I'm like, dude, look at this thing. You're on this? This is an all hands on deck situation. If you're not careful, you're going to fall right in there. And then you're going to take the time to read a New Yorker article? I mean, give me a break. And the site today, people sometimes ask, and I could have put this at the end, I put this here. I don't really know. Juan Orlando Hernandez, of course, lost his last election, and he was extradited to the United States for narco crimes, which I'll talk about again at the end. I don't know what the status of the site was because he was the big champion for the site. So we know, and I can tell you at the end, of course, all of the artifacts that we ultimately excavated from the city of the Jaguar remain in Honduras, which is our common protocol for working overseas. With sort of modern archaeology, and they've built a small museum where those objects are hopefully still there, but I honestly, I can't tell you that. But I can tell you this is from an event here. Notice my matching tie in Honduran colors from the Nordstrom in Fort Collins. This was an official sort of National Geographic event, and I came down and I was like, you know what, I'm going to meet the president of this country. I should have something, right? I should have like a plaque or something. So, you know, I'm at Colorado State, it's Rams, so I got the you know, the official alumni gift catalog from central administration, and I chose a Ram thing out of there, one that wasn't too expensive, and you know, I got it, and they're like, I went to the trophy shop to pick it up, and they were like, what do you want inscribed on it? I'm like, oh my God, I have no idea. So I said, put, you know, Juan Orlando Hernandez, annual official Colorado State University Latin America Conservation Award. I arranged for it, I arranged for them to pick this thing up the next day, then I had it all carefully timed out, and I was going to head straight down to DIA, you know, I had all the timing, was all sort of arranged. I get to the trophy shop, they've completely destroyed his name on the thing. So like, don't worry, we can fix this. So I get there, I didn't have time to put it in my checked luggage. TSA insisted on like ripping the bottom out because they thought I had something in there. So I get it back, and there's a person at the hotel who's able to like fix it for me or whatever. So then we give him this trophy or whatever, and he's like, we pose for the photo, and then he hands it off to this guy. And I look over, and the guy takes it, and he opens this closet, which is completely filled with plaques and kind of like the scene in the first Indiana Jones movie where they put the Ark of the Covenant in the cheese. He puts it in there and closes the door, and I'm like, well, this is a waste of my time. But this image was in The Source, which is the official CSU magazine. And it said, you know, Dr. Fisher presented Juan Orlando Hernandez with the Latin American, you know, Colorado State Latin American Conservation Award. And I'm like, oh man, I'm going to get in trouble or something. I got all of these emails from people asking me what the nomination process was. And of course, many of you have seen this book. There's a documentary on the Science Channel, National Geographic Explorer episode. There are also Lost City of the Monkey God chocolate bars, a video game, a hunter and postage stamp, which I don't have a copy of, little trinkets that you can buy on all sorts of crazy stuff. This project was really the first LiDAR project to sort of go around the internet 100 times. And the way that the PR was handled for this project and sort of the protocol that they set up for talking about a LiDAR discovery, this project became kind of the template for that, for better or for worse. And all of the more recent LiDAR discoveries, like you might see from the Maya region, etc., all follow that same sort of template. Okay, so back to the Earth Archive, of course, we're running out of time. The climate crisis will fundamentally change our Earth. We have to act now. We have a very limited time to document the Earth as it exists now before it disappears forever. And our Earth will fundamentally change. Even here along the Front Range, things have changed so much that, you know, if John Denver were to appear here, I'm not sure that he would recognize parts of the Rocky Mountains. They're fundamentally different from the way that I actually remember them from when I was a child. So we absolutely are running out of time. We only have one shot at this. We have to save the planet. There's no margin for error. And I liken this to sort of the Titanic. Everyone's on, you know, right now everyone's on deck. We're about to hit the iceberg. Shouldn't we save everything we can on the lifeboats? Shouldn't a digital record of what the Earth looks like now at a high resolution that includes all of the archaeology, all of the topology, all of the geology, all of the trees? We have the technology now to document every tree on the face of the earth. Shouldn't that be something that we include on the lifeboat? We can do that for about $5 billion.
Yes.
And I know that sounds like an incredible amount of money, but that is 2 deck chairs on Jeff Bezos' yacht, right? I mean, that, given the amount of money that we're spending on crazy things, we actually can do this. And this is the ultimate, in my opinion, the ultimate gift that we can give to our grandchildren's grandchildren, is a document of what the earth looks like now. Maybe they'll be able to reconstruct it. They'll be able to learn from it. And that's what the Earth Archive is really about. So here I am with my TED Talk, probably one of the biggest audiences that I've ever given a talk in front of. I don't know if you can tell, but I'm absolutely terrified. I'm so freaking scared. Absolutely scared. I just focused on the people in front of me. I didn't try to look back.
Inspiration there.
Yeah. Exactly. And of course, we know how to do this, and what I argue is that we can do it by scanning the entire surface of the world, or at least areas that are most threatened, with high-resolution LiDAR. And then open source those records. Make those records available to the public, to industry, etc. As many business leaders and geospatial leaders have recognized recently, holding on to data and selling data is not actually how you make money. Giving the data away, getting people to use the data, and then selling them the tools to actually use those data. That's where the money is. That's why these companies should be paying sort of to do these big scans. And of course, we've done it before. We know it works. We've done this before. Here's a picture of me looking majestic in the jungle. I didn't know they were actually taking this picture, otherwise I would have run away. Here is a picture of me climbing up to the cache location at the City of the Jaguar. This is an image that I took from a helicopter, and it shows you how threatened this Mesquite area is. This is very recent deforestation, and in this part of the world, people are cutting down the trees, not for the timber, not for the lumber. They're cutting these areas, they're clearing these areas so that they can run cattle on them. And it's something that's called narco-deforestation, the worst kind of deforestation that you get. And then this beef is sold primarily to fast food industries in the United States.
What a surprise.
Yeah, exactly. So, you know, it used to be when my daughter was smaller and we'd drive by McDonald's, she would open the window and call them monkey killers. She wasn't far off. She wasn't far off. The real tragedy for me is that this wastes the bioinheritance of countless generations of people, because you cannot replant this forest. It developed under a very different climatic regime. And if you replant this, it will turn into pines and fir. You cannot recreate the rainforest, given current technology. You cannot recreate the rainforest here. Once it's gone, it's gone. And of course, we've published a lot of this stuff. There's a PNAS article in a whole bunch of places. So how did I actually get even started with LiDAR? I was trained as a traditional archaeologist, a boots on the ground archaeologist, and in 2009 through 2010, I was performing traditional archaeological survey, walking along the landscape with groups of students, documenting every site that we found. We found a site that was so big that we couldn't find the edges of it. And my students encouraged me, you know, the protocol is when you find one of these sites to find the edge. So my students encouraged me to walk across the edge of this landform that this site was on. It's on a recent lava flow, which is called locally a malpais. And they encouraged me to walk across this landform to find the edge of the site. So I grabbed a radio, which I promptly turned off because I didn't want them to find me. a couple of Cliff Bars, some water, and I walked for about an hour and a half until I got to the other side of this landform. And I got there and I was like, oh, there were building foundations all the way across. Oh, this is a city. And nobody knows about it. And I had my Indiana Jones moment for about 30 seconds, and then I was like, oh crap, this is a city. Because I knew that's when the hassles were going to start. Because based on what we knew about this past society, there weren't supposed to be cities there. It wasn't supposed to be as early as it was supposed to be. And, you know, it's 2010. How do you find a new city in 2010? That can't be possible. And up to that point, I had just been doing archaeology, doing my thing. People hadn't really been paying attention that much, right? Now they were going to pay attention. Now it was going to be a big deal. So for a couple of years, we performed more traditional archaeology, walking across that place, documenting sites. We could document about 1,600 architectural features, pyramids, granaries, roads, houses. We could do about 1,600 in a 2-month field season or so over the summer, you know, on an academic schedule over the summer. Given the size of what we thought the site was then, which was 10 square kilometers, we now know it covers about 27 square kilometers. And has about 68,000 building foundations on it.
Wow.
But given what we knew about it then, on the time scale of a normal academic career, that would be it. That would be everything that I did for my entire career, was surveying this one site. And when I was, you know, first a graduate, when I was a young graduate student, that would have been the course of a normal academic career, was doing that, doing the survey, writing some stuff up, timing out, retiring to a place like La Vida, right? That would have been it. But I'm super impatient, and I didn't want to do that. So I literally walked down the hallway to a colleague's office, and I was like, dude, there's got to be a better way. And he's like, have you heard of this thing called LiDAR? And I'm like, what in the hell is that? And it's 2010. Nobody knew anything about using it basically for archaeology, especially in the Americas. We had a little bit of money in our NSF grant. We did a small scan. I looked at the data, I'm like, what in the hell what did we just do? I'm never going to get another grant again. What do you do with this stuff? This is insane. We worked with it for a little bit. We saw our first hillshade, and then I immediately, I wish I could say that then the light bulb was like at the top of my head, and I was like, but bam, this changes everything. And it took me a little while to get there, but I do believe that now. And I immediately realized that this was groundbreaking. This was completely different from what we had done before, and that it was going to change the course of archaeology. And as I have argued in press, it's a paradigm shift. It's a paradigm shift, and it's coming. You know, we have this scientific revolution at exactly the right time, because we need to use this scientific revolution to document the Earth. And here's a reconstruction. One of the reconstructions that we do. We were talking about art maybe before the talk, a little bit in science. All of these reconstructions are art. You know, a lot of us archaeologists actually do art, and this is some of the art that we do. These are, you know, the data. You can walk through the data when you collect the data using airborne LiDAR, which I should tell you what that is. But in this part, I manufactured so I could lift this off like the Rocky Horror Picture Show. Yeah. Although I'm never in the right place to do it correctly. Everything you're seeing here is an archaeological feature. That's a pyramid. This is a plaza. This is actually a cemetery. These are 2 altars in that cemetery, buildings. Everything that you see here is constructed by people. And these are the kinds of data that you get using LiDAR. And you can see every tree. Every tree is represented here. So what is the kind of LiDAR that we use? We use airborne LiDAR using some sort of aerial platform, drone, plane, helicopter. You have basically a box that shoots down infrared beams toward the ground surface. When one of those beams strikes something on the ground surface, it could be the ground itself, could be a leaf, could be a bird, could be the top of the head of an archaeologist. It returns back to the sensor on the airplane. It gives you, on the aircraft or whatever you're using, gives you a measure of distance. That grid of infrared beams is so dense that no matter how dense the vegetation, some of those beams will hit the Earth's surface. And what you end up with is a three-dimensional cloud of points. It is not a photograph. So all of this stuff that you see and all these images that you see from LiDAR are visualizations, reconstructions that archaeologists have done, or somebody has done, using software to visualize that three-dimensional cloud of points. It's a digital record. It does not degrade like a photograph does. It's a permanent, as long as it's stored correctly, it's a permanent record of everything, of the Earth's surface and everything on it that we can curate in perpetuity.
Who invented it?
That's a great question. So LiDAR is not a new technology. It's been around for a really long period of time. There's actually a LiDAR instrument on the moon. It's on one of the Apollo missions. Very rudimentary. And there's many different kinds of LiDAR. So it was actually developed by scientists in the late 60s, early 70s. It's been around for a super long time. In the middle 2000s, there was a convergence of a bunch of different things that allowed us to, that really fundamentally changed our ability to use LiDAR. That is an increase in computing power, development of new kinds of software, and the unscrambling of the GPS signal. So that we can, and when those three things happened, it really fundamentally changed the way that we could use LiDAR.
Yes. Will it penetrate shallow salt water like in a marsh?
Yes.
It will.
Yeah.
I need to
So-
talk to you, okay.
Okay. So there's I'll just talk about this really quickly.
Okay.
So there's a great study that was done somewhere in Texas, somewhere in the Gulf of Mexico, where they were actually able to see, there was some sort of basin. I can't remember exactly the context of it, but it was some sort of basin, and there was a narrow gauge railway that was on this basin, and they after the railway was abandoned, they flooded the basin, and you can so it's like it's like 10 feet underwater or something like that. It's very clear water, so that's the one limiting factor is you can get a lot of particulate matter in the water. But it's very clear water, and you can actually see the tracks and the locomotive. Like a very clear picture of the locomotive, which they just left when they abandoned the railway. They just left the locomotive there. So it won't penetrate water. It won't shallow water. All of this attention that we got for the project, there was a lot of media attention, etc. Boy, that was a learning curve. That was certainly a learning curve dealing with the media. Got the attention of a group of filmmakers who had just scanned 3 areas of Honduras looking for this legendary lost city, which doesn't exist because it's a legendary place, right? But what they did find was some pretty significant archaeology. One of those people, Steve Elkins, called me up. I talked with him a couple times on the phone. He's like a very energetic, standard issue kind of LA type person. He actually came out to Fort Collins and showed us the data, myself and another colleague from CSU. We looked at it and I was like, yeah, there are a couple cities here, there's tons of other settlements, there's terraces, there's a lot of other things that is shown in these data. And Steve's like, well, do you guys want to join the project and help us interpret this stuff? And I was like, well, I don't know, I'm kind of busy, I got a lot of stuff going on. But it was pretty cool, and so we said, yeah, of course. We released our interpretations of the data, and there was a massive firestorm. People didn't know much about airborne LiDAR at that point. It hadn't really been applied to a lot of archaeological studies. They said I wasn't a specialist in the region, which is kind of not necessarily true. They said that we didn't know how to interpret the LiDAR, which also wasn't true. They said that everything that we were seeing were geologic features, that it wasn't significant. None of that stuff was true. So it was decided to undertake a field expedition to this location to field verify some of the results so that we could document what we had found. And so the filmmakers got together some money, brought down a helicopter, and we went out into the jungle to sort of test these areas. Honduras is a dangerous place. It's filled with a lot of people that go there to escape other sorts of things, malcontents, etc., which probably is why I liked it so much. Felt right at home. This is, and it is the series of it's politically unstable. This is the location of our laboratory that we used as the jumping, kind of our forward operating base that we used to go into the jungle, which was a place called El Aguacate, which was an airfield that was constructed by the CIA during the Contra affair. It also was a place that was used to store the drug seizures, etc. This is also a location that we used as our laboratory and where we stored all of our luggage, which is why we have a couple of pieces of luggage that I can't really fly with anymore. One of the reasons that we have so many bags in the garage, I'm sorry. The center of this place where they had done these scans was the Mosquitia, which is often called the lungs of Central America or the Little Amazon. It's an incredibly rugged, uninhabited area on the border of Nicaragua. It's absolutely beautiful. It's endangered. It is the home to hundreds of endangered or supposedly extinct species, etc. It's a critical, it has all sorts of national and international protections. It's a UNESCO biosphere, etc. None of which means anything unless the money and the resources are there to actually protect it. There is a long history of faux archaeology that's been done there. And in the book, Doug talks a lot about Mord and sort of his fictitious attempts to find something there, which he of course was a complete and utter fraud. And I can talk about that at the end if people want. But all of the work that he did was basically completely fictitious. He announced just before the start of World War II that he had found this amazing place called the Lost City of the Monkey God in this Honduras area, and it got all sorts of press, and he was touted as this amazing explorer. He was also a little, sort of booster. There was also much boosterism engaged with his work, including having the foresight to hire the person that had made the movie posters for the original King Kong movie to make his reconstructions of the City of the Monkey God, which were published in lots of different periodicals. And these are actually scans of his journals that I went through at National Geographic. And there's a long story about how they got these journals, etc. This is the only archaeology that is noted in those journals. Is these two tiny sentences that are in it. This is it. The rest of it is just completely and utterly fabricated, and there's a long history of that I can discuss if people are into that. So we released our findings, and it's pretty amazing stuff. Here you can see I've outlined in red the center of what we call the City of the Jaguar now. 2 large ceremonial precincts with hundreds of mounds and other features around it. This work got a lot of press. Doug Preston published an article in the New Yorker. several articles in the New Yorker, etc., sort of presaging the LiDAR revolution. And eventually, as I've mentioned before, we did go to the location, successful only by helicopter. I was trained to rappel out of a helicopter, but we were able to land the helicopter, thank God, because every time I tried to rappel out of the helicopter, or I was trained to do it, I would end up hanging upside down. The British SAS guys that they had hired to teach us how to do it would just push me for about 5 minutes until I was like, all right, guys, let me know. Everything that we saw in the LiDAR was there on the ground exactly in the way that we had visualized it, including animals and places that weren't afraid of people and places without plastic, etc. What I was not expecting to find at the center of the city was a cache of objects that had been left there when the city was abandoned, probably sometime in the 1530s. And there's Doug Preston right there actually pointing at one of the objects in the ground. That's me in the orange raincoat, and I'm about to have my 5 seconds of fame, where I basically yell at everybody, get the hell off the archaeology and leave everything alone. So what we found were a cache of objects at the center of the site that are basically kind of thrones of power, seats of power, and other objects that were, some of which were ritually broken, that represent the last council meeting at the city of the Jaguar before they ritually closed the site and abandoned it forever, sometime in the 1530s, probably due to European introduced disease and the perturbations of the collision of the old and new worlds. Here are some of those objects left exactly as they had been left, sometime probably in the 1530s. They're jumbled and twisted by the sort of centuries of jungle action, but you can see them there. This work was published in National Geographic and all sorts of different places, including a reconstruction that was done by National Geographic of the city itself, and it's the first reconstruction, I believe, that has ever been done with LiDAR, and that was certainly an interesting exercise. I thought, if you'd asked me how these things are done before, I would have said, well, Nat Geo buys an artist a bottle of wine and they go to their loft and they come out the next morning with this thing and it's done. But that's not how it was. It was weeks and weeks of back and forth trying to figure it out. This, in the end, is the actual reconstruction of what the city may have looked like from Geographic. There was a firestorm of controversy over what to do about the city. The Hondurans wanted to remove the objects. I basically said, over my dead body, if any objects are removed, it will be done scientifically following archaeological protocols, or I'm out. We go back to the States. We're done here. So in the end, we decided to leave the objects in place, and I went back to the U.S. and I raised over $1 million to correctly excavate in those objects, have them curated, and also curate and protect the site as best we could. We got money from National Geographic and from a whole bunch of other places. We decided in the end to use Honduran helicopters, which was the most sort of cost-effective way to do it. It turned into a huge mistake, basically. But we felt that we had a moral and ethical obligation to go back and do the right thing for the archaeology, and that's exactly what we did. So we excavated in 2016 roughly a quarter of the deposit and covered the rest with earth and gravel to protect it. Everything had to be hauled in by helicopter. Tables, equipment, food, everything that we needed, and all of the objects had to be hauled out by helicopter as well. So we had to very, very carefully calculate the number of flights that we were going to use and how much fuel we could get and how we were going to get the fuel and et cetera. It was a huge logistical nightmare. I actually hired people to help me manage that because there was just no way I could do that and try to focus. It was the most, I don't think it's an understatement to say it was one of the most complex excavations that's ever taken place in that part of the world. Some of the objects were looted in the 6 months between that period of time. The only people in there were soldiers. So we think those objects were moved probably to embarrass the president. And this is video that was, it's never been released, but this is video that was taken of that actual excavation that was done in 2016. Not many people have actually seen this video. So this is taken with a drone, this section with the rainbow. And I know just last night my wife was saying, Chris, if you show the videos, you have to, you're going to go over. So make sure that you're, now I'm going to go over, so I'm sorry guys. I don't, sorry. Logistically, it was an absolute, it was super intense. Everything had to be flown in and out using these helicopters. The helicopters were, all of the helicopters were manufactured in the late 1960s, saw service in Vietnam, refurbished by Taiwan, and sold to Honduras. So they were pretty hammered, to say the least. And we had several incidents with the helicopters. I probably won't show you this video, but on the way out, one of the last flights out, the door came off a helicopter with a bunch of my people on it. They were almost all killed. They very, very, at the last minute, they were able to sort of recover and fly out of there. And then the next day I had to fly out on that same helicopter. So it was, there are risks that I wouldn't, archaeology's cool, but it's not worth dying for. So there are risks that I definitely wouldn't take today. Here is the actual excavation. We were able to recover about 400 objects, which were all flown out of the jungle, carefully curated. And they all lay basically where they had been left several centuries before when the site was abandoned. And they basically represent the last council meeting that was held at the city of the Jaguar before it was abandoned. Everything was carefully excavated, recorded, of course, as you would imagine, with using modern archaeological protocols in the same way that anybody would do these sorts of things. And I mean, it looks like a very small area, but that is a massive area of materials to excavate. The objects were all super incredible and constitute probably the largest professionally excavated collection of these kinds of artifacts from Central America.
How many of you were there working on this? 6?
And that's about all I could handle. I'll just quickly run through these because I'm going to go over time, but this is one of my greatest archaeological triumphs. I wasn't at the excavation of King Tut's tomb, but before I went down to Honduras, I had prepared a lecture on the excavation of Tutankhamun's tomb by Howard Carter, and I remembered seeing this litter that was used to haul artifacts from the tomb itself to the barge, and then the barge hauled the artifacts down to Egypt, or to Cairo. And this is a chariot. This is one of the chariot wheels from King Tut's tomb. We had a very similar problem in that we had to haul artifacts down the hill into the helicopter, get them set up in the helicopter had to fly out to the jungle, and the artifacts had to be secure. So I'm like, I got it. So we made these litters for them to go on. If they would fit into one of these action packers, we put them on there. Otherwise, we just put the artifact itself on one of these litters. And I just really dug the continuity, you know. I bought a bunch of gold spray paint, and I was going to have the soldiers spray paint these gold as an homage to the first Indiana Jones movie. Thank God I didn't do that, because if the media had picked up on those pictures, it would have been like a nightmare. But here you can see us hauling these things out. Here are some of the larger artifacts that would go into the helicopter. And we did have issues with the door of the helicopter, etc. In the end, there were about 400 objects that we were able to recover. All of them were thoroughly documented, curated, professionally curated. I actually brought a curator down, who now is actually the head curator for the Steven Spielberg Museum. So he actually is curating the original artifacts from the Indiana Jones movies. He cut his teeth here in Honduras. What has happened to everybody since then? I know you've all read the book. You can't hear this video, the text, the audio, unfortunately, for this. This is from William Shatner's show, I think The Lost or something, Unexplored. Unexplored, that's what it's from. And they were talking about curses. And one day my daughter was watching something on TV and she's like, "Dad, did you know you're in this?" I was like, "What the hell, are you kidding me?" So now apparently, according to this show, everybody that was at the lost city of the monkey god is cursed. Because many of us got leishmaniasis, this flesh-eating disease. We're going to also talk about it at the end. I refuse to take part in this kind of crap, basically. So they get other experts. So you have these other experts talking about there's Steve Elkins, by the way. You have these other experts talking about the curse of the monkey god. People I've never heard of. Talk Thompson. I don't know who that is. David Whitehead. I don't know who these people are. Talking about my excavation here at this thing. So I made a deal with myself that from now on, when I gave one of these talks, if they're going to talk about curses and the fact that I'm cursed, I'm going to show them mummy. So here's my mummy. So if we're going to talk about curses, man, I want to talk about mummies. Juan Orlando Hernandez, what you can't hear here is that this is former Attorney General Merrick Garland, talking about how they extradited Juan Orlando Hernandez, charged him with running a narco state, which he did. And he was convicted along with his brother Tony, who I met many times. I met Juan Orlando Hernandez many times. They were convicted and he was in federal prison. I think he got a 25-year sentence. Given his age, that would have been a life sentence. I met Juan Orlando Hernandez many, many times. He was super personable, charming, spoke English, consummate politician, but I never forgot that guy was screwing his people, and he wouldn't hesitate to screw me. And every time I shook his hand, I found myself washing my hands repeatedly and repeatedly and repeatedly, because I knew I had just shaken the hand of a murderer. And he is indeed a murderer. And he was just pardoned by Trump.
Yes.
Several months ago.
Yeah, that's
That
right.
proves even more.
So here's Juan Orlando Hernandez. Here he is at his trial. Here he is doing his sort of perp walk. Here's some pictures of me with him in various contexts. Virgilio, if you've read the book, you know Virgilio was our contact with the government. Also a consummate politician, absolute liar. I just never trusted anything that Virgilio said. When the previous administration fell, when Juan Orlando Hernandez lost the election, I had high hopes that Virgilio would also be prosecuted. But this is why I don't think there's any justice in the world. Because Virgilio is living the greatest life as the ambassador to South Korea for Honduras. So he was actually able to keep afloat, I guess, during whole sort of thing. Here is Virgilio at the city of the Jaguar after a trip to Miami, where he bought a complete jungle outfit at Bass Pro Shops. Including, as he insisted on showing me, camouflage underpants. Usually, when I'm in the jungle, I wear the brightest stuff possible, because if I get lost, I want people to be able to find me. And I was like, Virgilio, this is perfect. Walk that way. Steve Elkins, I had a very mixed relationship with Steve Elkins. Steve did some amazing stuff, and he did get he did get a lot of serious work done, and it was awesome. But Steve is super kind of hard to deal with, and what Steve really wanted was to be an explorer. That was his big thing, was to be an explorer. He got a medal from the Honduran government. It's like a kind of a big medal, shiny, and it's on like a ribbon. And apparently he'll wear it out to like dinners and stuff. Anyway, he's been all, the Explorers Club has had him on and all sorts of stuff. And he's on, all this sort of, I don't know, here he is with a hat and all that. So Steve got what he wanted, but I can't be too hypercritical of Steve, because he did get some, some amazing stuff done. And I have to say, our funding is dried up. It's not drying up, it's dried up. NSF is dead for archaeology. That's where we usually get our money. All of these other places are dead. So we have to get our money from this sort of stuff. We have to be better about going out and getting money for this sort of stuff. All of the aircraft, most of them have crashed, including a major crash that killed Juan Orlando Hernandez's sister right before the last election. And it was one of the things that probably cost him the election, because she was the brains behind the operation. And she was actually killed in one of these crashes. So all of these aircraft they're all done. They've all crashed. The site today, as I said earlier, a misplaced slide probably. I don't know what the status of the site is. I don't know what the status of, Juan Orlando Hernandez did give a lot, provide a lot of money for the protection of the Mosquitia area and for the archaeology. It probably came from El Chapo, but he did provide the money. I don't know what the status of the site is today. So the Earth Archive, if you want to learn, I don't want to go over too much, but if you want to learn about the Earth Archive, come grab me afterwards. We have a website that is sort of functioning. You can email me. We're rebuilding the Earth Archive sort of as we speak, and we have done several scans. But this is kind of my sort of hopefully big contribution that I can make to archaeology and in broader society, I guess, before. You gave me this, and I totally forgot I had it. I just realized it's clicker. But you can contact me, whatever, and I'll answer any questions that you have.
Right?
It's not really a question, but I was kind of amused at when people were talking about, oh, these are metates, and then maybe they used to grind bones on it. And then there's a little field, a little thing at the bottom that you said, that's absurd, don't print that. And they printed it.
Yeah, they're not metates, they're seats of power.
Well, I know, they were saying, some cultures used to grind the bones of the dead on it. You said, that's absurd, don't print that.
Yeah, it is absurd. And, it's absolutely not true. Absolutely not true.
It was an enjoying footnote.
Yeah.
How was the 535 AD determined?
Pardon?
How was the 535 year date of the cache?
Oh, for the abandonment?
Mhm.
That's our best guess. We don't actually know, but we do know that around that period of time, there are massive perturbations that are happening in the region, massive migrations and abandonments due to the impact of European introduced disease. So starting in 1518, that's kind of the benchmark date when Cortez was kicked out of the city of Tenochtitlan, the Aztec capital, for the introduction of European introduced disease into the Americas. And then it spread like wildfire throughout the rest of the Americas. So you didn't, of course, need to actually see a European to experience the impacts of European folks. So we know during that period of time, disease was moving through this area. There were massive abandonments. The mortality rate now is estimated, from European introduced disease, is estimated to be 9 out of every 10 people or so within the first 60 years of contact. I don't know exactly how many people are in this room, but that's like 4.5 of you or something. I'd hate to be the half person. Something like that. And you know, I don't think we can underestimate the impact of that, of those events. We know that entire DNA lineages of people were wiped out. Imagine having to survive, basically just basic survival. You know, you might be an infant. You might be a super elderly people. I mean, imagine surviving. You have to survive. You have to get shelter. You have to, do everything you need to do. Plus, I have to imagine you would question everything that you'd ever been taught. Like this would be a super profound thing. And we don't really even have a great analogy for how, the Black Death in Europe was like 10% or something like that. COVID was way less than 1%. So, 90%. We have to, Stephen King, The Stand, we have to turn to like fiction to even get some sort of feeling or analogy for what that would have been like. So that's why the site is
You talk about the hospitality of the territory and all the challenges that the people faced that built this place. So in relation to all those risks, natural risks, there no computers, nothing to help them build this. Do you have any insights or thoughts regarding the consciousness of these people, how they were able to pull this off, the construction of such a place?
Yeah, that's a great question. So today, City of the Jaguar is one of the most remote places that you can be. There's no internet. There's nothing out there. Even getting a satellite phone connection is super difficult. Like I would call Kirsten and we would have like 20 seconds, and basically I'd be like, I'm alive, stuff's going okay, I'll talk to you in 4 days. It's that kind of stuff. Crackle, then you're done. So it's like, today it's like one of the most remote places you could be, one of the most remote places I don't think that's an overstatement. In the past, it was intimate, this place was intimately connected to every place around it. And it would have been covered, today it's covered with this dense tropical forest. In the past, it would have looked more like an abandoned garden. The entire landscape was completely modified by people, and millions of people occupied it. So there would have been roads, orchards, gardens, agricultural fields, settlements. You would be able to easily, 5-10 minutes walk to the next settlement. So it was also a place that was super important. They had products there that were super important for the rest of the Americas. It's one of the premier cacao growing places in the Americas. Chocolate cacao is a very fussy crop. It demands very specific environmental conditions. Some of the best chocolate is actually grown along the coast there. So cacao for the ancient Americas was consumed mostly as a beverage, but it was also an elite beverage. It was used as a form of currency. It was super, super important. There's placer gold there, so there's actually gold. And the other super important thing that you could possess in the prehistoric Americas, the other wealth object, were the feathers of tropical birds. And this is where the Quetzal bird was from. And the range of the Quetzal bird today, whose very sort of long tail feathers were highly prized by prehistoric peoples, the range today is very, very constrained to just a few specific areas in highland Honduras, but in the past it was much more extensive. And when Cortez and the rest of the conquistadores entered Moctezuma's treasury for the first time in Tenochtitlan, they were like, dudes, this is where we cash in. There's gonna be gold, there's gonna be precious gems. This is what we came for. And what did they find? Feathers and beans. And they're like, what the F is going on? What are these beans? Why are we even dealing with this? Because those were the two of the most important precious commodities that you could have in this. So that's a great question. You know, today it is this like super inhospitable place, but in the past it wasn't necessarily like that.
Do you think leishmaniasis was native, and how are they managing it with you guys?
So the leishmaniasis that we got is a mutant form of two different varieties of leishmaniasis that is especially virulent and hard to treat. And the NIH scientists actually did sort of a study, and they pinned the date for this mutation sometime in the 1540s. So after the time of abandonment. Leishmaniasis is endemic in the Americas. It's in the tropical Americas. It's endemic in Central America. But the two varieties of leishmaniasis that people usually get are not as virulent as the one that we got. So leishmaniasis normally has like an infection rate of around 5% maybe, and it's easily treatable. We don't actually know what the infection rate was from the variety that we got because the Hondurans hid the people that got infected from us. But I'm guessing it was higher than 50%, which was why we were all treated for this at the NIH. We got a injection of Ampho B, which is this, and this is why the NIH was so interested in this, because they were terrified of this thing getting out. And so we all got infusions of Ampho B. The first time I got that, my body totally freaked, which is normal. My body totally freaked out, and I had a bunch of NIH doctors that were kind of watching me. And I got this intense pain. Kiki's heard this story a bunch of times. And I got this intense pain in my back that went down my spine. And I was like, you know, if this gets any more severe, I'm not going to be able to handle this. And they gave me an infusion of some stuff, and I was okay. And then afterwards, the NIH doctors told me that what I experienced was basically 1/4 of a birth contraction. So I, one of the only males that will ever meet that knows how horrible it is to give birth. 1/4, and I couldn't really handle it. So, yeah, but that's why the NIH was so interested in that. Is 'cause
Wow.
Who were the ancestors of these people?
they were their own people. They were kind of related to the Maya, but they have their own cultural history. So they probably occupied that place, you know, tens of thousands, you know, like maybe when people first entered the Americas, we don't really know when that is. I tell my students 40,000 years now because of all the new things that we've learned about some of the first people to enter the Americas. And so that place was occupied for like a super long period of time.
And did you find any stone tools in that mix?
There were some stone tools. There was also ceramics and other sorts of things. Yeah, and shreds, yeah. I have to hook.
If there's no more questions.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I gave the book to Shan's daughter.